I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Nick Tasso at The Inefficient 2. Taking a look at tonight's 9-10 game slate, depending on what slate you're on. That FanDuel slate does have the second game of the Cleveland doubleheader. DraftKings does not. We also have ourselves a Kershaw slate, and 14K on DraftKings is pretty steep. How are you feeling about that price tag?
I feel if it was a bigger slate and you're able to pair them on DraftKings with someone who's a little bit cheaper, I think it might be okay. But at the 14K, I don't know if there's anyone you really could pair with them to offset it.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement. I mean, FanDuel, it's a different story. I think it's still not a bad price tag. I can just fit him in. And I believe he gives you about 2,700 left over for each position. And decent value on tonight's slate, so I don't necessarily mind just locking him in.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, you can drop down in GPPs, but for cash, it's probably going to be Kershaw on FanDuel.
Yeah. 7:05 here, Mets and Nationals. Bartolo Colon taking on Gio Gonzalez, a rematch of this game that happened last week. Colon looked bad. He was all over the place. Gio tossed a nice outing. And, you know, Washington minus 141 favorites. I definitely don't mind Gio in this matchup. I think he's one of the guys you can possibly look at dropping down to.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the Mets and their top 5 in strikeouts. They do a little bit better against lefties, but they're still kind of in that range where they're going to strike out a decent amount. And you look at Gio, and he's been pretty good this year. It's weird to say that. And like you said, you have Colon on the other side who didn't look too sharp. I think that was probably an aberration. I think he'll pitch a little bit better, but I still think Gio is in a good spot to get the win here.
Yeah, I mean, Gonzalez at home, he's been dominant this year with a 1.16 ERA. Obviously, it's just a couple months in. But I think the strikeout rate is something that's really intriguing just because it's north of 24% since last year against lefties. So it gives Gonzalez a little bit of that upside. So I think he's playable as an SP2 and just all around kind of a solid GPP guy too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to fit him in with Kershaw, but if you're not going Kershaw, he's not too bad for an SP2.
Yeah. Next one here, you got Phillies and Tigers, Vince Velasquez versus Mike Pelfrey. 8.5 over-under here. Philly minus 104 favorites. Pelfrey, obviously, a guy we're not really looking at even against the Phillies. I just don't think there's enough there for him.
Far away, actually, from both these pitchers in cash games. Pelfrey's just terrible. You look at Velasquez, he's good, but this is still a Tigers team that you're not sure what you're going to get. They could strike out at a tremendous rate like they've done, but they could also hit you pretty hard. So I think he's an intriguing play for just not in cash.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Tigers, yes, they're top 10 at WOBA against righties, but they also have a 23.4% strikeout rate. So you look at what Velasquez can do and what he has done this season. I mean, a K percentage over 30, that certainly puts him in play. I mean, we've seen pitchers come in and dominate the Tigers, especially in the strikeout department.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's not something that I really want to risk at this point in cash games.
Oh, definitely
not. He's deadly for GPPs.
Yeah, for sure. Next one here, you have the Rays and Marlins over under 7.5. You got Matt Moore and Wei Yin Chen. 7.5 over under Miami minus 129 favorites. I wish Chen was a little bit less expensive, I guess, on DraftKings. I mean, because I don't mind him as far as an SP2 goes, because, I mean, you're looking down below. There's not a ton of options, and you're going to have to take a little bit of risk. So I was kind of hoping that would maybe come at like 1,000 less.
Yeah, I mean, that's a steep price tag for Wei Yin Chen. Hasn't been that bad in his career. He just struggles sometimes with giving up home runs to righties. But other than that, he's a pretty decent pitcher. He doesn't have too much upside for strikeouts, but he doesn't really allow too much runs. At that price tag, though, you just have to fade him.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I mean, if you look at this Rays team, I mean, they do have, you know, some quality right-handed bats in that lineup that do hit lefties pretty well. But they also strike out a ton, 23% this season. So, I mean, Chen, we saw it with the Brewers. I mean, he can dial it up every now and then, but overall, it's not something I really expect from him on a nightly basis.
Yeah, I agree with you there. As for Matt Moore, I don't mind him for a GPP play on FanDuel. His price is pretty low, 6,900. I know he hasn't been that good. He's still, I guess, coming back from his surgery, and he just has been inconsistent, but it's still there. And I mean, Marlins have a decent amount of lefties in there that he could kind of just equalize them and kind of get through Stanton, and he might have a good outing.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, 6,300 on DK is not a bad price tag either. I mean, you're taking some risk. And you look at the Vegas here, I mean, it's a pretty low over-under. You're looking at Miami being one of the better ballparks. So I think with these lefties, it's just going to be the ones that it just kind of depends on which one actually shows up because both have upside, but they also have reasonably low floors.
Yeah, and if I had to put money on it, I'd have I'd be on Matt Moore having a better outing than Chen.
Mm-hmm. Next one here, you got Angels and Rangers, Nick Tropiano versus Derek Holland, 9.5 over-under. Both these guys are two of the cheaper pitchers on tonight's slate, and even though they're cheap, I just don't think there's not much appeal here in Texas. The Angels' offense is starting to come around a little bit more. If Mike Trout sits, though, because he did leave yesterday's game, Holland at the price tag, I can maybe see tossing in a GPP bullet with.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there, but I just feel like the Angels, I know their season-long numbers are pretty bad. I just feel like the past few weeks they've been hitting a little bit better. But you're right, if Trout's out, that kind of changes the whole landscape of things. So it's not too bad, but I just have Holland's last few starts. I know last one he was okay, but the one before that he's been pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can kind of see maybe doing is pairing him with a Kershaw. I mean, because he's only 4,700. So Trout does it. I mean, reasonably, he gets you 10 to 15 for what you hope, and you're hoping Kershaw has his monster outing, and 3,900 left over after bats is not bad.
No, absolutely.
So, and on the other side, Tropiano is a guy who sometimes I can get behind just because he can dial up some strikeouts, but in Texas, I think Texas is a middle-of-the-road offense, but I still think he's going to have a little bit of trouble with this lineup.
Yeah, it's the ballpark factor for me. You look at Tropiano, and he hasn't been too good outside of the Big A in Anaheim. So I'm staying away from him, even though the Rangers' offense isn't that good this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Next one here, you got Royals and Twins, 8.5 over/under. There's some rain concerns in this one. It's in Minnesota. KC minus 118 favorites. Ian Kennedy, Ricky Nolasco. Kennedy, I mean, he's a guy who's pitched well to start the season. I mean, he's had a couple up and down outings, but overall, I mean, he does have upside with the strikeout rate, and you're looking at a Twins team that does strike out a fair amount. I'm not a big fan of the price tag, though. I think that's my biggest issue with him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's way too high, especially on DraftKings, over 10,000. It's just he's kind of priced too far out there. I know it is the Twins, and he could kind of have a really good outing, but I'm just staying away from that. He's a fly ball pitcher, and there's a few bats that could kind of connect here.
Yeah, I think FanDuel, I think he's looking GPPs for me. 8,400 is not a bad price tag.
No, not at all.
And weather concerns is probably the other option there as far as if it kind of sits in play, but it's obviously early in the day to kind of tell.
Absolutely. Just wait and see for that on FanDuel.
Yeah. Nolasco there, I'm kind of looking to pick on him tonight with some Royals bats.
Yeah, I like Nolasco overall, but he just hasn't been that good this year.
Yeah. And if you're looking at on FanDuel, they have the Indians, White Sox. It's Cody Anderson, Eric Johnson. Over under of 9. This one's pretty simple as far as pitching goes. We kind of just stay away.
Yeah.
Next one here, you got Cubs and Cardinals and 7.5 over under. John Lackey versus Adam Wainwright. Wainwright, he pitched well. Kind of surprised me in that last start of his. Lackey's pitched pretty well this season. I'm not really behind either of these pitchers. I don't think there's enough upside really for both of them in these spots against these offenses.
Yeah, I agree with you. Wainwright, we're really not sure if he's going to be the Wainwright we saw last time out. The rest of his starts have been really bad, and it's just one of those things. He's kind of older in his career now, and you're not sure which kind of Adam Wainwright you're going to get. So I'm fading him. And then as for Lackey, he's been good. It's hard against the Cardinals. They have the second highest WOBA, and they have a strikeout percentage under 20%. So there's really not too much of an upside here. So I think I'm going to fade Lackey on this, even though his price isn't too bad.
Yeah, and I think, Lackey had one of his better outings against the Cardinals earlier this season, but I don't see anything for a repeat, even though his strikeout rate's been up this year.
Yeah, and you also look at the Cardinals, and they hold the second best isolated slugging as well. So if a couple of them kind of can connect and hit them hard, it could be a kind of a bad night for him, for
Yeah, I think
Lackey.
so too. Um, Next one here, you get into the late games, A's and Mariners, Rich Hill versus Taiwan Walker. Over under 7, you're in friendly Safeco Park, Seattle minus 125. This one, I'm leaning a little bit more towards Rich Hill. I think there's more of a strikeout upside. I know the price is higher, but overall, I mean, in that department, he's been absolutely elite. 11% swing strike rate and 28.4% K percentage. So I like him. I think the Seattle team, yes, they've been hitting the ball well, but they're going back home against a lefty. And you look at those right-handed bats that Seattle throws out; they haven't been particularly hitting lefties well this year.
That's exactly what are in my notes. The righties for the Mariners have really underachieved this year. And Rich Hill's K percentage is just so high right now. He's been pitching pretty well. His ground ball rate is high. So I just think he's in a good spot here. And I think it's a little weird that he's not favored, but it's probably because of the home park for Seattle. And if you look at all of his starts outside of the spot start he made for opening day, he's just been really reliable. He's going almost 6 innings per start, and he's really not allowing any more than 3 runs. And when you look at the potential he's had with strikeouts this year, I mean, you really can't go wrong. His price is a little high, but actually I like him in this matchup.
Yeah, I do too. I think the only concern for me here is the walk rate, 10% there. He's done a great job at working out of jams, and I think one of the reasons you see him go 6 innings, maybe 2 or 3, there has been times where you look at him and you think that line could get potentially so much worse with watching his games, but he just works out of jams, and it's something you like, but it's also tough to stomach when he's sitting there in your roster.
Yeah, it was crazy. You look at last season, the end of the year when he was with the Red Sox, and he just had those crazy outings where he'd strike 10 guys out almost every game, and he would get into some trouble, but then he just looked completely different the next inning, and he would just, I think he averaged almost 7 innings per start last year when he made those few starts with the Red Sox.
Yeah, and I think you look at that Tampa game 2 starts ago, he allowed 3 in the first inning, and then ended up pitching 5 more scoreless, and even came out with like over 100 pitches in that 6th inning and pitched another one. So still got you 20 points. And I think that's kind of something that's really encouraging as a guy who, you look beyond the stats.
Yeah, I mean, as weird as it sounds, he kind of reminds me of Keuchel from last year, where he gets the ground ball rate, he's had a good strikeout rate, and even if he does get in trouble, give up a few runs here or there, he's still able to go deep into the games and get you what you need.
Yeah, definitely. And Walker on the other side, I mean, I'm a big fan of his. I'm still not a big fan of the A's picking on them because I'm just not sure the upside's quite there. I'm not even sure a win's quite there with him tonight. So I think he's just kind of an odd man out. Not necessarily I don't like him, but he just doesn't kind of fit the bill for me on the slate.
Yeah, you look at the A's and they really don't strike out too much. I know they had 6, Pineda had 6 against them yesterday, but Walker only had 3 Ks last time out, so he's pretty inconsistent with that. And the Athletics really don't score as much, but if he's not getting the strikeouts and he does allow, say, 3 runs, it's going to kind of really hurt his potential.
Yeah, definitely. Next game here, you got Reds and Dodgers, 10-10, and Dodgers minus 370 favorites, 6.5 over under. Kershaw, I mean, we talked about him at the beginning of the show. FanDuel is kind of just an automatic lock in there for me. I mean, you could say with Cueto, but I still think I'm paying up for Kershaw there. But DraftKings, it's a different story. I mean, 14K is expensive, and you have Cueto $1,400 cheaper. I still think that $1,400 can become somewhat useful, especially because you mentioned that there's not really a ton of SB2s you feel comfortable rostering them with.
Yeah, that's the biggest issue I have with Kershaw on DraftKings. On most slates, even when Kershaw is priced in the high 13,000s, you still typically have some guy you can find in like the mid-7 range that you feel pretty comfortable with. But today, I really don't see anything, so it's really hard to pay up for Kershaw when I could save that money, go right down to Suedo or even cheaper than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, as far as Kershaw goes, I mean, obviously the elite of the elites. I mean,
yeah,
we'd be repeating ourselves over and over again.
Yeah, Cincinnati isn't that good. They have a bunch of lefties like Bruce and Votto, and it's a pretty good matchup here. Games at Dodger Stadium, and Kershaw is just really fantastic there.
Yeah. Looking into this next one there, obviously I'm not taking a look at Finn again. I don't know if you are. I know his Dodgers offense hasn't been that great, but
I would think maybe just on FanDuel as a GPP play, just because he's so cheap there. And you do look at the Dodgers offense; they're mainly lefties, but it's not something that I'm going to have a lot of exposure. And there's a good chance I probably won't have any exposure.
I think some of those Dodger bats, I mean, kind of carry some value tonight, like Hernandez and Trace Thompson. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I think they kind of fit in as well as pairing with Kershaw if you're playing that route.
yeah, those guys are pretty cheap.
Yeah. Next one here, last game of the night, Padres and Giants, Drew Pomeranz, Johnny Cueto. San Francisco minus 168 favorites. It would be much more if it wasn't Pomeranz on the other side. And I feel like he always draws the short end of the stick. He's always going up against Cueto, Kershaw, Bumgarner. He never can get a guy where he's a lock for a win. Because I really do like Pomeranz, but not in this lineup. But Cueto, I think, easily the SP2 of the night as far as below Kershaw.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at Tuedo, he's been really good this year, 2.59 ERA at home. I know his road one isn't even that far off either. And the Padres are top 3 in strikeouts, and they have the lowest batting average. So his matchup is the best one of the night.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what Cueto's done against San Diego this season, 19 strikeouts over 18 innings, allowing just 1 run. I just expect that dominance to continue, especially at home there. So I really think he's an easy spin down for me off Kershaw, and kind of he's my number 1 more so on DraftKings just because price considered.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Unless you're able to find some really cheap bats that you can fit Kershaw and another higher price guy in there, which I'm not sure you can do on DraftKings tonight.
Yeah, I agree. And Pomeranz, great pitcher, but I think it's just another kind of tough luck situation where not in my radar.
Yeah, I don't mind him in GPPs, but the Giants really don't strike out a lot against lefties, and they're pretty good ISO. So it's just one of those things. The ballpark's good, and he's been pitching well, but his matchup, he kind of, like you said, short end of the stick here.
Yeah, I mean, if he was a little bit cheaper, I think I'd be fine with him as an SP2. If he was in that kind of $7,500 range, I'd be okay with that.
No, absolutely.
So that's going to wrap things up here with the pitcher nail down. Be sure to check out DaveFantasyCafe.com for all our great tools and content.